All right, let's see if anybody can actually hear me. Sorry, the stream sort of started on me there. Didn't really mean to, aha. Looks like everything's working now. Hello for the random people that showed up. I was setting up a stream and I wanted to post it, and I didn't realize the moment I was hit streaming it was gonna go in OBS. So, uh, hence the sort of weird intro. Sorry about that. You'd think I get better at this the more I do it, but actually don't, which is kind of funny when you think about it. So let's see. So, hello everyone. Wow, cool to see some people already. So I thought I'd do something a little bit different today. I'm going to do a Houdini stream rather than a Blender stream. So yeah, I mean, with that, I guess I'm going to dive in a second. So I'm going to try and make something interesting. I'm working on a project for a music festival at the start of the summer. I have to make a whole bunch of visuals for them. Um, so it's going to be in kind of a weird resolution, but I think the techniques are going to be quite fun. So I'll try and keep my eyes on the chat as well. So hello everybody, thanks for dropping in, saying hi. Let me switch over to my thing here. There we go. So yeah, some Houdini instead of Blender. I think if I go to resolve real quick, so it's actually something like this. We're gonna try and, well, we're gonna create, I guess. And now it's giving me an error. Okay, well, I can't change the resolution now, YouTube. We're already going. Let's see if I can change it in the settings. No, there's absolutely no way to change it without stopping the stream. So, well, that's what I get for just starting the stream randomly. Okay, well, if there's any issues, please let me know. I sort of haven't streamed in a while, so I haven't get everything set up again. But yeah, basically, if you're looking at the screen, let me full screen this real quick. This is what we're going to try and create. So the reason the resolution is a little bit wide is because it's designed for a stage. So it's going to be a gigantic sort of lead wall. And that's why it's in such a weird strip. But I'll build the effect first, and then I'll show you how I render stuff in Houdini as well with Karma. So yeah. Let's see. I want to go back to that other window here. Which I can't. Okay, cool. So let's go back to Houdini. So if you've never used Houdini, I'm sorry. This might be a little bit out there. I think you could do something somewhat similar in Blender, but I've been using Houdini a lot lately, and I thought it was fun to do a stream on something else. So I'm going to give myself a lot of space here. Now it's going to be quite small, so maybe it's worth just upping the user interface size a little bit. Like that. I'll probably have to restart it. So let me just restart Houdini real quick. All right, cool. All right, so you can see I've already got my thing set up for when I'm working on this stuff, but I'll switch back to the normal interface that people might be used to. I'm just going to collapse this. Just give me a little bit more space, and I hope it's a bit more readable this way. So yeah, Houdini, right? Good fun. So I know my resolution is a 6:1 aspect ratio, so everything I'm going to work on is going to be quite wide. I'm going to start with a box in the SOP context. If I get some of these terms wrong, it's because I'm still learning quite a lot. So yeah, let's see. Why isn't this doing what I want it to? I can't move it around. That's fine. So what do we want? First, I want a box. I'm going to size this to what I need it to be because of the resolution, and that's fine. I'm going to subdivide it a little bit. For some reason my, oh, now it's working. Okay, so something was wigging out there. So I'm going to subdivide this a little bit, have this have 7 divisions instead, so we get more like a tube shape or a pill shape. And you could probably set that up separately, but I like to do it this way so I can add subdivisions if I have to. There we go. And then we're going to displace it a little bit. So where in Blender you'd use a displace, with a noise texture here you can just add a mountain, and it gives you a very similar effect. But rather than having it 0 center, I want to add it so I have my base shape and I can already add into it. And I think for this to work I have to make my size a little bit bigger and then correct my subdivisions here so I get polygons. Not that that's a huge deal. And actually I might switch it up of how I was doing it before, just to experiment a little bit as well. Let's see. So let's actually use that 0-centered noise and then push the amplitude a little bit. Now we're going to get something that's a little bit more broken up. And from here, I'm going to create a VDB from polygons because I want to actually scatter some points in a volume. And I don't want the volume to be homogeneous, so I want to break it up a little bit. So we're going to get a volume here. Let's see, and then we get the density. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to set these to 1. Maybe make the voxel size a bit smaller. And I have my window open here because it's quite warm. So I apologize if there's any background noise. If it's really distracting, let me know and I'm happy to change it. Now to visualize stuff a little bit easier, generally what I'll do is I'll just have an attribute, I guess remap. Sometimes I use a wrangle, but let's do a remap. And basically what I want to do is grab the density and just multiply it by 10. That should work, but it doesn't, because let's just use volume VOP instead, because I don't know if they're attributes, and I know this works. This is usually how I do it, I guess. So we're just going to multiply the density. There we go. And then we can input a parameter here. Have the parameter go from, have it 1 by default, have it go from 0 to 10. And then we go back out, we actually have that parameter here. So really all I'm doing is just upping the density just for visualization. It doesn't really make, I don't know, it doesn't really make much of a difference to what I'm doing with it. It's just to get an idea of what's going on. Now, one of the things I do want to do is break this up a little bit. So let's see. I'm going to add a noise to it before all of this craziness. So let's put that over here. And then we're going to multiply the density again by a noise map. So we'll put that in first. And then let's see which noise we could use. The turbulent noise is pretty quick. Yeah, I found that some noises, the same is true for Blender, some noises are faster than others. No, let's not put that in the frequency, but in the position. So we're going to hook up the P for position into the position. And then when we multiply this, you'll see you actually get sort of a broken up noise. And just multiplying that by 10 at the end gives you a little bit better of a visualization, I guess. You can put in a ramp parameter here as well. And I'm just gonna spline ramp this to keep it simple. And now nothing's gonna happen because if we go back out, you can actually control it with the ramp here. So we've got my parameter, which I'm gonna give it a name. I always forget where to give this a name. There we go. We'll call this visualizer multiplier, so vismult. And then this is our ramp. And on the turbulent noise, I'm going to right click it and just say vex/fop options and say create input parameters. And what this is going to do is it's going to give me all my parameters here. So I don't have to go in and out of the tree constantly. And I can just set them up here. So let's multiply by 10. And then because this ramp by default for some reason goes from 0 to 0, you might want to play with this. And the reason I'm putting this in is so I can just kind of mess with the contrast a little bit. So you'll see, I just want to create like broken up sort of clouds. And that will then let me scatter stuff in there. I think this should work, and otherwise I'm just going to do points from volume. Yeah, so we're going to do by density. And this is where some of the stuff I'm doing here, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I think, if I'm correct, I think the channel is called Doxia Studio, but I'm not sure. So let me just, yeah. So Doxia Studio, they have this Houdini tutorial nebula. So he makes nebulas, and kind of using a very similar technique to what I learned from him. So if you want to see the full thing and him explaining the way he does stuff, definitely check that out as well. But, you know, I just want to give credit for where I'm getting some of this information from. So one of the things you want to do is if you're going to have a lot of points, so let's say I want like 1,000,000 points, you can see this takes quite some time. And the reason, if you look down here, it takes so long is because it's doing relax iterations on the points. So I just hit escape. I'm going to set this back to 10,000. The moment you turn off the relax iterations, if I do 1,000,000 now, you'll see it's pretty instantly. And we don't need it to relax anything because they can just be jittered because we're going to do all kinds of stuff to them. And this way I can very easily set it to like 5,000,000 points if I want to, and it's not too slow. And I have to turn off my max point limit here as well. You'll see it'll do 5,000,000 points pretty quick, but let's leave it at 1 for now and work with this. So to get this to kind of move around, or rather to get the shape of the nebula first, we're actually going to do some more VOP stuff, but I'm going to use a point VOP because at this point they're all points. I don't know why my thing is bugging here. Maybe it's because I'm streaming, but that never wigs out. So I'm going to do a point VOP. And basically what I'm doing here is I'm going to use noise to kind of push these apart and give them more of a bit of a nebula vibe. And it's like a two-stage process. First, I'm going to use just regular turbulent noise, and then I'm going to go into flow noise, which gives you this more like, let's see, I guess more like nebula, like tendril-like stuff. So somebody's saying, what about point generator node instead of, and I can't read it properly because of the stupid emojis on top. What about point generator instead of adding more points in the parameter? I'm still pretty new to Houdini, so if that's like a thing, I have no idea what you're talking about. But if there is a specific node to do this kind of thing, I'm happy to hear it. So, yeah, if it's a more efficient way to do it, happy to hear about it. So, what was I going to say? Okay, we're going to first start displacing this, and then we're going to do something similar. So I want a parameter again, so I can have a little multiplier, and I'm going to multiply my noise. I'm going to put in another turbulent noise, and then I'm going to hook everything up. So basically what I'm doing is just have a noise multiplier, or noise mult, rather. Put into position here, multiply this by that. But before I do that, I'm going to disconnect it because, well, I'll leave it and then I'll show you what it changes. And what I want to do is I just want to add this to my position. So I'm put in an add node, and it's very similar to geometry nodes, you know, where you're just adding like a noise texture to the positions of your points or your edges or polys or whatever. So in that sense, you know, at the end of the day, it's all similar. And again, I want to set all my options so I can play with it. Where's my input parameters? And then that way I don't have to go back into this node to mess with things. So obviously my multiplier is set to 1. 0 by default. And I'm actually going to have that go from, where is it? Set the default to 1, and maybe have this go from 0 to 5. And you'll see something happening, and that's that it's all pushing in one way. And that's the thing I was saying earlier about I'll leave it before I change it. So this turbulent noise is set to 1D noise. If we set this to 3D noise, excuse me, then it actually pushes out in all 3 directions, which is nice. So now you'll see it's kind of pushing out in all directions. Now, technically it is, but it's all in positive directions, so it's still kind of going to one side. Generally for this step, I use the zero-centered Perlin noise because that actually gives you like a proper noise pattern that moves them all around. And you can already see it's breaking up into interesting patterns. Mess with the frequency a little bit, make it a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. I'm going to start with a big frequency. Maybe set this to 10 just to get like a big broken up noise. And I can always go back and tweak the other stuff before I do this. And then it's just a case of copying and pasting these a couple times. So now that I have that set up, what I can do, no, I don't have to go back in. For this one, I can make this one, again, up the frequency a little bit. And then bring this down a little bit. And you can see it's all about just kind of breaking it up in the right way. So breaking this up. Sometimes it'll do 2 or maybe 3. See if adding another one helps. So if we make this even smaller, does that really do anything? Kind of works, but you also don't want it too like randomy either. So let's see. That's fun. That kind of works. We can always tweak it if we have to. And then the second bit of this is the, basically it's the same kind of node, and I'll build it from scratch. So it's another point VOP. There we go. And it's exactly the same thing, but with a anti-aliased flow noise, and that gives you like the tendril type of look. So let's throw that in here. Again, another multiply, another parameter, noise mult. And actually delete that one. Make sure this is also set to 3D noise because we want it to go in 3D space. There we go. And then another add. And then again, you'll see nothing happening once I hook this up because the parameter is set to 0 by default. So let's set this to 1 by default. And again, give it a range from 0 to 10 so we can have some leeway. And also have the input parameters of the flow noise in there as well. Because one of the cool things that I noticed as I was working on this stuff is not only does this, like if we turn this down, you can see how things get sort of like streaky and nebula-y is the best way to put it, I guess. So again, I'm going to start with a pretty big one and kind of push it to give it that sort of feeling. And the cool thing is if you animate the flow from 0 to 1, you get a perfect loop. Now for this big one, I wouldn't necessarily do that. Maybe bring the amplitude back down a little bit, but I can again copy and paste this and bring the multiplier down a little bit and bring the frequency up. And now you'll see we really get these like tendril nebula-like feeling things. And this one, because the multiplier isn't as high, if I bring it up a little bit, if we animate the flow on this one, it's going to give sort of interesting movement, and that'll look really cool. So yeah, let's try this. I'm going to add the usual null. So this is a really easy way to output stuff and bring it to somewhere else. I'll call this nebula. So let's, so Jay's asking, what made me pick up Houdini? I don't know. I'd messed with it on and off, and then recently there was a project where I needed a lot of different kinds of simulations to work together. So it was a good time to finally dive in and try to learn it properly, because I tried to learn it before, but I never really had much of a project or something to focus on, so it kind of felt like a stab in the dark most of the time. And then on this project, because I had to actually had a goal, everything sort of clicked together, and I think having used geometry nodes for a while now as well, it all kind of started making sense. Um, and it's nice to have something other than Blender. Obviously, I still love Blender and I still use it all the time. But every now and then, it's nice to be able to just kind of dive into something different, because it forces you to think differently, and you can't fall back on like a usual workflow. And yeah, I feel in Blender that I end up repeating myself quite a bit. And with this stuff, I have a new sort of toolbox to play with. And that helps, I guess. So sorry for that extremely long-winded answer. So let's see, we've got the nebula now. And let's look at these frequencies. I feel there could be another one in between. That's like a little bit bigger. I'm going to bring this down just a bit. So when I animate the flow on this one, maybe a little bit bigger. And see, it kind of flows in an interesting way. You can always mess with the self-advection as well. That gives it a slightly different flow pattern. Go. But I feel it is slower, so we might leave that for now. We can always mess with it. Let's see. Let's try 360 frames first for a loop and see how that goes. So I'm going to set the flow on this one from 0 to 1. There we go. And then the flow on this one from 1, because we're at the end, to 0. You could always reverse this as well to get like an interesting, and actually I'll do that. I think that might be interesting. So we go from 1 to 0 on this one, in the opposite direction. So now when we play, I'm going to set this to 360. You can see we get this like interesting moving nebula. And I'm actually going to set it up to where I want it to play real time, and I want to maintain the real time playback, skipping frames, so I can get a feel for how fast it's actually going to be. So that looks kind of cool. What I might do is just increase the width of the original box, so I have a bit more to play with when I'm actually setting the camera up. So there we go. All right, kind of fun. Okay. So, okay, let's start setting up some other stuff first. So now that I have all this set up, after the scatter, before we displace everything, I actually want to add color. So if I just start typing color, I'm going to get an attribute adjust color, throw that in there. And I want the pattern type to be noise. There we go. And let's mess with the kind of noise and the size that we want, and mess with the color as well a little bit. So Houdini has all these really, oh, I picked the exact same one, funny. Interesting color maps built in. I usually, because the thing is, these aren't like, what's the best way to say this? These aren't like the masterpieces I'm trying to make, to put it that way. This stuff, it's a bit of a production line because we need to have a lot of content by the end of June. So I can't spend too much time tweaking every single one of them, but I will. So I generally just start off from one of these colors and then mess with it a little bit to see. Put some orange in there, some red. It's maybe too much. Some dark red. Maybe darker orange. Something to break it up a little bit. I like the blue, but maybe not that blue. That works all right, I guess. And let's play with the offset until we get an interesting distribution. Colors. And again, I'm going for speed here, not for anything beautiful. Let's mess with the interpolation. we set this to Bezier, we get a bit more. Oh, invert it and flip it to the other side. This is more, just like more pastel-like, I feel, which is nice. Maybe bring down, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Let's delete that one. Bring this one down a little bit. Yellow is a little bit much. I made a second point again, didn't I? Yeah. There we go. And the blue isn't really a perfect match, so let's mess with it a little bit. Get a little bit brighter now. Not sure. We'll see. I don't like that there's like these big patches of color in there. I usually try to avoid that a little bit. There we go. It's maybe a little bit better. Now there's more emphasis on the like the oranges and the reds and the magentas, but that's fine. It looks kind of interesting. Let's see, let's play. And because we set our color in the beginning, we get these really nice evolving shapes. Okay. We can mess with the scatter amount as well. So let's do 10 million maybe. Let's up this. Now we get these really full, intricate looking nebulas. And the colors are a little bit more defined because of the amount of points. And maybe we'll try something kind of wild. Let's set this back to 1 million. Maybe let's animate the flow of the first one as well. That's going to make huge changes. That might be interesting to look at on a really giant LED wall. Let's see. There we go. That looks kind of interesting. It's moving around. Once that gets a bunch of motion blur in it, that's going to look pretty wild. I think one of the things I want to do, though, is just mess with the sparsity of the distribution. So break it up maybe a little bit more. There's a bit more definition in the individual parts. So they kind of pull away and push together. That's fun. And let's mess with the offset of the noise just to get like a distribution that we like. And I mean, for anybody that hasn't really used Houdini a lot that's watching this, this is the power of Houdini. It's all just right there. And, you know, I have this scene set up, and once I have this set up, all I need to do is change colors and patterns, and I can make 5 of these, render them out pretty quick. And they look amazing. So it's still a little bit too broken up over on this side. Let's mess with the offset a little bit more. I'm wondering if I should mess with the mountain as well. Mess with the offset here as well. There we go. That has bigger effect. Figured. So I'm also designing this with the stage in mind, knowing that the artists are going to be in the middle. So I'm just trying to look for a pattern that fills it up in an interesting way. I liked where that was going. This is kind of cool. All right, let's put our camera in and see what we get. Camera, and we're going to translate it about 10 units out. Let's have a look at the camera, and then we need to set up our view. So I'm working at kind of a weird resolution because that's how the stage is designed. I'm going to stop mentioning that in a minute. And should I do perspective? Maybe, maybe not. Let's see. So for stages, I tend to do a lot of stuff that's orthographic. I'm also, oh. There we go. I'm also going to set the background here to dark. And then have the camera view mask opacity set to 0. And that'll give us or not to 0, it was already set to 1. There we go. And that will give us a view of what it's going to look like. And it might be a little bit too fast. I might have to bump this up to like 20 or 30 seconds to get a slower moving. Because like you've got to think about when it's projected on something that's like, I don't know, 30 meters by 10 meters, or I don't know what the exact size physically is. I'd have to look it up. You want people to be impressed but not overwhelmed, which is not something you think about when you're posting something on Instagram, but it is something you have to think about when you're doing a design for a big stage. So I think this is going to be too fast. I have a feeling. Let's see, can I do a flip book here? There we go. Yeah, that's fine. Just start it. I'll give it a second here. So I have a look at any more questions. Makes sense. You're amazing with Blender. I look forward to Houdini students. Well, thank you. It's interesting. I think there's a lot of people doing amazing things with Blender. And all my stuff is very niche, I guess. It's very, yeah, this type of thing. It's the best way to describe it, I guess. But it's been fun trying something else. It really has. So. And Nathan asks, have I ever messed around with the Touch Designer? No, I haven't, but I've heard good things about it. Maybe in the future. Right now, I'm still using pre-rendered stuff. Yeah, so this is way too fast for a screen that big. So this is going to be super overwhelming. All right, so I'm going to have to make this a lot slower. So let's see. Let's set this to 721. And go back in, look at my animation editor, and I believe these last 3 are edited. Yes, and then we'll move this to 721. There we go. That should be fine. Can I zoom in a little bit and move this to like proper? No. Okay, then don't. And one of the things I have to do as well is make sure this actually cycles. So this is kind of the interesting thing about Houdini. A lot of this stuff. So if I do cycle with offset on all 3 of these, so this is the first one, you can just very easily make it loop. And you can do the same thing with keyframe modifiers in Blender, but the workflow for this is really crazy how fast it is. Where'd it go? Is it above the other one? Where did I put it? Where did it go? Oh yeah, it's all in the same shop network. So you're still learning. And then cycle with offset, and then you'll see all 3 of them are in here. I keep forgetting that. So this is for these 3 guys. So I'll put them next to it. All right. So now, and the reason I do this is if the flow keeps going, then you have to make sure that that they keep going. Otherwise, on the first and the last frame of your loop, your motion blur will only be half as much, and it looks kind of weird for those 2 frames. So that's why I always have it cycle. This looks like it's a lot more doable. And again, let's just create a quick flipbook. It's going to take a little bit longer. So again, if there's any questions, feel free to ask. It's not too bad. But yeah, doing quite a bit more VJing as well lately, so it's fun. A lot more operating, so it's interesting to get into. Now that LED walls are becoming a bit more ubiquitous, yeah, by far the favorite thing to work with for me. I've done a lot of stuff with projection in the past, but projection always has limits. And I mean, you can do amazing things with projection, don't get me wrong. It's truly wild, you know, when it comes to things like projection mapping. You can't really do that with an LED wall. If you have like physical objects you want to project onto, things like that. But just for sheer like coolness of seeing your stuff on a big screen, you can't really beat an LED wall. So, alrighty, we can keep it going. Well, I can already play it just to see what the speed is like. It's kind of frantic in some places, but it's okay. The motion blur will hide some of that. It's a little bit much here, but I think it's okay. I think it'll be fine. Again, motion blur sort of softens it a little bit. So, all right, cool beans. Now, what do we need to do? We need to do some other stuff as well. We need to make sure our P-scale is set up. So when you're rendering, and actually I'll show you what I mean by that before I start rendering. So with Houdini, what is it? 19, I think Solaris was introduced. It's this whole context to be rendering in. I do things slightly differently. It's probably a better way to do it, but this is the way I found to do it. I'm just gonna switch to my weird setup here that I have for rendering. It's kind of like the Solaris one, but just a little bit of a different layout, just because I'm dealing with this stupid wide resolution. I can maximize the screen size and the render size a little bit to look at it. So I'll bring this down a bit so we can see it full screen. I'm just going to set this up to where I don't see anything else. Make my background black. So background dark. And then I'm actually going to pin this. I'm just going to create a lop net here. And the reason I do this in here is I get all the Solaris stuff. But if you switch to Solaris, it like unloads your scene, like does some kind of USD conversion, loads it back in. And if you're switching viewports to start rendering and you want to go back to your geometry context, there's like a bit of a delay and it just kind of annoys me. And I found that this is quite a bit faster. So, you know, whatever you prefer, I guess. So I have everything in here. So I want to start rendering. So I'm going to set up my render network. And first I'm going to get a SOP import. And I'm going to import all my cameras from my scene, which is just one. And then merge these two together. There we go. And start a karma node. And that gives me all of my stuff to render. I don't have any lighting yet or anything, but yeah, at least this is set up. One of the things I do have to do is first actually import my geometry. So let me just unpin this here and pin this viewport. That way I'll always see my rendered view. Again, set the background to dark. Even when I go back to my geometry context, if it's pinned, I can just see the final render the whole time. So I want to import from that null I created. There we go. And I want to make sure my cameras are imported, but in here, I actually want the camera to be in here. It's slightly different because I didn't create it in a sort of similar context. And I want my resolution to be 3840 by 640. Now I'm going to switch to XPU just for the speed of the GPU rendering. And now when we switch it over, you'll see, because I don't have any lighting, it just gives you like a weird sort of viewportish looking render. But this gives me enough to go on to mess with my P-scale. So I'm going to do an attribute randomize. And first it's going to do the color, but I'm going to change this to P-scale. Now they're going to be absolutely huge because we're going from 0 to 1. And I want from 0.001 to maybe 0.00 2. Let's just see how that looks. Now we get more of a nebula looking thing. So let's do from 2 to 3 maybe. And now we're actually going to up the amount as well in the scatter. So let's go back to 10 million and see what that gives us. Give it a sec to load. Let's see, this is starting to look a little bit more like a nebula. Let's try 20 million. And that's the fun part because these are just points. It's not that crazy to render, so you can just keep upping the geometry. And the more RAM you have, I don't think I'm too worried right now. No, I'm still only at like 26 gigabytes. So that's fine. Not a big deal. So now we're at 20 million. That's kind of nice. Let me turn that off. And our P scale seems okay. Maybe a little bit bigger. Let's do from 0.25 to 0.05. Maybe just to get a bit of variation in there. Just to really fill it up and give you a sense of depth, I guess. And obviously putting a putting a light and everything in there is going to help as well. So one of the things I do want to do is turn off my depth of field now that I'm here. So when sampling, I'm going to set my f-stop to 0, and that's effectively just going to turn off my depth of field. Let's go back into the LOPNet and start adding some lighting. But this is actually quite easy because it's like space-like. I just want a single sort of point source for the sun. And now that I have my distant light in here, let's give it a second to compile and start rendering. So for some odd reason, when you put in the distant light, it just shines light from the front. I don't know why that's the default, but you know, there you go. Let's give it a second here. It's taking a minute to compile, probably because of all the points. But then once it gets going, it's pretty quick. There's a few more things to do. I have to set up motion blur. I have to set up my materials, so I'll do that in the meantime. So I'll make a material library, pop that in here, make a karma material. There we go. And then we can put in a geometry color. So this is actually going to read, so the karma works with material X. So if you put in the material X geometry color, it's going to read your point colors. And if I put that in the base color, we should be fine. And I don't want any specular on this. I just want it to be a very, very simple sort of diffuse surface. And then we have to assign those materials. And this is taking a long time to compile. It's interesting. So we'll do assign material. And we'll throw our SOP import. And as you might have noticed, I haven't given anything proper names. So obviously when you're doing this, give things names, and then that is linked to our material. So let's see, why is it erroring out, or is it just, let's restart the render. It sometimes helps. There we go. And if I now use my karma render settings as my output, I will actually see my proper output. So now the light's coming from the front, but I don't want that. Can I see my lights here? There we go. I want my controls. No, I don't know why it's not giving me my controls. There we go. Okay, and I just want to, and this is weird, getting back to an application that uses mouse controls for everything is very interesting. And now I'm moving something else. I'm definitely not moving the light. There we go. Now I'm getting controls for my light. Set up my camera view, and now it should be moving the light. You can see I'm still struggling with some stuff. And then we can turn it to give it like a side thing, up the intensity a little bit. Now we're getting almost like a nebula that's lit by the sun. We can make it a little bit more dramatic. There we go. And then as it moves around, it'll kind of shadow and deshadow things. It'll be really interesting. Let's see, maybe I don't need this many points. And what I want to do is the contrast is really harsh, and especially on an LED well where the contrast is already super harsh, I'm just going to add in a dome light just to fill it up a little bit. Maybe not as much as this, but just to have the darker parts not completely disappear into black. There we go. Let's see the distant light, if we maybe have it come a little bit more from the top. Maybe from the bottom. That too dramatic? That might actually work. That's kind of interesting. Let's swing it around. That's kind of cool. Isn't it a good idea to save? Yes, actually, now would be a good time to save. Thank you for reminding me. So this is stars 03. Stars 03. There we go. Although Houdini's been pretty stable for me at least. So now we've got this set up. Maybe it's a little weird having it come from the bottom, but I can always change it up later if I have to. Oh, there we go. Let's actually do a test render just to see it in its full resolution. I don't think I need this many samples. 32 might be enough. Let's see, I want my motion blur to be on, but I still have to set that up. I'm not going to mess with the sampling too much. That's usually fine for something like this. I'm not going to put in a denoiser, but I am going to use lossy compression for the EXR. Let's see. I think that's usually everything that I set up. And then finally for motion blur, and actually we can keep looking at this. We're going to actually set it up here. So at the very end, what I want to do is just put in a point velocity, and that will calculate the velocity of my points for me. There we go. And then if everything's correct, you should see, yeah, you can start seeing the motion blur. You can kind of see it in the frame here. So that's good news. I always wonder what the curl noise does. What does it do? It just gives you random curl noise velocity inside the thing. Just messes with your motion blur. That's cool. Did you look at that? Every day you learn something new. So let's make the duration. So we're working on 720 is 30 seconds. So let's do like a 5-second pulse duration. That's interesting that it messes with the motion blur so you can get an even crazier effect. Okay, I'll turn it off for now, but I might mess with that in a future thing. That's good to know. So then you get movement, but then you get motion blur that doesn't match the movement. That could be really, really crazy to look at. Mess with your head quite a bit. I think we're almost there. Do I up the dome light? Yeah, maybe just a little bit. Let's set this to Houdini GL because I found that if this is rendering and you try to render here as well, that's kind of rough. So let's just render a single frame, see what it looks like. Give it a second. Yeah, so it's really quick. Once it loads in, it renders insanely quick. There's a bit of noise, but you're not going to see that with all the madness. So let's actually render it at 200%, even though I don't need it that big, just to double check everything. Percentage of resolution 200. And render to mplay. There we go. Oh my god, Mantissa actually streaming. Yeah, hey, it hasn't been as long as last time. Last time I think there was like 4 or 5 months in between. Now it's only like 2 or 3 months, so that's fun. But yeah, here you can see the individual dots. I'm not too bothered by it. I kind of like it that it looks that way. One thing we could do to like have it really look like space is maybe have some stars in the back, but I could always put that in separately if I have to. I'm not gonna set that up. So you can see even at 200%, it's only 30 seconds for this. Admittedly on a 3090, but yeah, maybe a little bit more samples. It's still a bit grainy, so let's just double the samples and go for final resolution here, just to see what that would look like. So maybe 64 samples, and render a final resolution, just to give me an idea of how long it'll take. But if it's more than 20 seconds, I'd be surprised, honestly. "16 seconds, yeah, I thought so." All right, it's a little bit noisy, but again, I doubt you'll be able to see it. Yeah, I think this one's actually ready to go. Cool, cool, cool. So let's set it up. Where am I rendering everything to? Just gonna set up my render path. Projects, CG, render, and then do new folder. And call this stars. 03 $f4.exr. So I'm doing EXRs, and lately I've actually completely switched over to ACEs for doing any sort of post-production. So if you're in Houdini, if you go to your not color settings but OCIO settings, you can actually, by default, I believe it's set to linear, Rec 709 sRGB. I've set it to ACEs, and that way I make sure all of my EXRs are being exported as ACES CG. Because I've had projects now where I've been mixing, what's the best way to put this? Mixing live action footage from different cameras with CG footage all cut together, and not using anything like ACES. Just, it became a nightmare. And I'm using Resolve for all of this stuff. So one of the things I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set up a flipbook. I'm going to set it to 100% size. I'm going to do my final resolution. There we go. And I'm going to output that in the same place where I'm rendering it. So basically, I have my sequence that I can import into Resolve while it's rendering, so I can already set up my timeline and all that kind of stuff. So I just call it the same thing. f4.exr, make sure get it right. f4, there we go. Accept. And I'm going to start this. And this probably will take a while because of the 20 million things. But that's okay. I have a different one that I made that I can, that I haven't done any, I guess, any post-production on. So I can give you a quick idea of some of the little things that I add. Maybe show you some other things. Oh, so this was playing the whole time in the background. It's pretty funny. Okay, and this was actually the one I wanted to do. I've made 2 of these so far. This one's in black and white, but it has a little bit too much gray here in the middle. I don't like it. I'm gonna have to go back and tweak it a little bit. The difference here is that I'm actually turning the camera around it 360 degrees to get like a bit more motion. Yeah, just experimenting really, and once I get a look for some of these, then I can keep going. This is the one I wanted to actually do some post-production on. So if you've never used Aces before, one of the things you need to do is, and I'm sorry, this is a really small resolution, but I'll try to narrate it a little bit. So in your project settings in Resolve, you go to color management, you set your color science to Aces CCT. Aces version, well, I'm version 1.3 with this version of Resolve. It'll probably go up in the future. And my input transform, if I'm just doing a project with just CG stuff, then I know everything that's coming in is going to be Aces CG. And then the output transform is Rec 709. So if you have no idea what stuff is, basically Aces is a system to, it's like a color space. And what that means, it's like a really wide color space. So anything you can bring into it, you can conform it to that. And then you can have your output to anything you want. But as long as you're working within that system and everything you're bringing into it is being converted correctly, any sort of operations that you do, from color grading to, adding multiple pieces of footage together to compositing or whatever, it's all just kind of gonna work. Yeah, it's some people like it, some people don't like it. For me, it works. I've tried other methods. I've tried using the DaVinci stuff that's built in, but I don't like the results from it. I like this a little bit better. And yeah, this just kind of vibes with how I do things. But I know not everybody's into it, but whatever works. So here you can see, I don't know if you're able to see it. You can see the resolution is kind of garbage, but you can see the sort of stars in the background here that I put in Houdini. So you get a bit more of a parallax effect. Well, let's actually get to grading this. So I haven't done any grades on these yet. Let's see. We want to push this. How far are we here? Okay, we'll give that another little while to move around. So grading is done using nodes as well as adding effects. Generally, I'll add most of my effects in here. Sometimes if I have a timeline with multiple shots, I might do an adjustment layer and add the effects there. And I saw some questions or some comments coming in, and I'll have some answers in a minute. I just want to do this first. So really, it's just a case of kind of pushing things up, seeing where they land. So I want things a little bit brighter, a bit more saturated, could be fun. I think that might be too bright. So bring it down, maybe up the contrast a little bit. And just kind of check it throughout the range. This one's a little bit yellow, so I don't know whether I'm going to change the color temperature of everything a little bit, just messing with it. And again, that's the fun thing about using EXR is you can kind of go all over the place. And one of the things I might do, and this is not something I do a lot, but I might do it here. So hue versus saturation. So I can specifically get this yellow and maybe just bring down the saturation a little bit, and you can see it changing because it's a little bit much compared to the other stuff. And I might do the same for hue versus luminance. Same idea, bring those yellows just down a little bit. Now you'll see they sort of fit in a little bit more. They don't stand out as much. So even if you went a little overboard on some colors in a project, yeah. There's one thing I'm still getting that I need to figure out. Sometimes I get these weird motion blur errors, and I'm not 100% sure what the issue is. So yeah, it's like a multiplicative motion blur or something. It's just one frame, so I could probably re-render it. It's not an issue. And then this one specifically, there was just one frame, so it just sort of wigs out for one frame, and I don't really know why yet. But that's more down to me not knowing Karma that well yet, I guess. So this is already looking kind of interesting. I might just lift the blacks a little bit, but that's lifting everything. Generally, I don't use curves as much anymore. I try to use my tools over here. It's starting to look kind of okay. What if I up the saturation a little bit more? It's maybe a little bit overly saturated, but I think for having it on a big stage, you can have it nice and colorful. And I can always desaturate it a little bit in my VJ application when we're setting up and evaluating everything if necessary. So this is actually pretty good. So What else am I going to add to this? Just to have it a little bit more interesting. Maybe some glow. Let's add a glow in. There we go. And I'm going to have the threshold down to 0. And one of the things I forgot to change importing this footage is, where is it? It's this one. So by default, Blender renders without transparency. You have to set it up in your settings. And yeah, it's not like that in Houdini, so I always forget about it. Okay, so I've made render engines comparison scene. It says Acid Marv currently fully switching from Blender to Houdini after 4 years in Blender. Rendering in cycles is painful. Oh, really? I really like cycles. I think it's really, really good. Dude, is this pre-recorded or what? No, it's not. I just answered your question. It just took me a while to get there. So now you'll see if I change the clip settings back. Well, yeah, basically the reason I do it this way is now the glow is everywhere. So there we go. And I want to set the spread pretty big and then just really bring it down. So really all I'm doing is just boosting the colors a little bit by adding a little bit of glow. And I keep pressing the wrong buttons because I think, there we go. And now you can actually see the stars a lot better. And did I mess with the color temperature? I did, so the stars are no longer white. Let's see. But I kind of do like that effect, so we'll see. I don't think you'll notice that much anyway, so maybe just mess with the tint a little bit, bring it back down just a touch, and then maybe just undo the overly saturated stuff. It's a bit more pastel. Let's just turn on the glow, turn it off and on. Then we can mess with the spread to see what it does. Maybe the opacity a little bit. It's really just to brighten it up a little bit. So just finding the sweet spot to where it actually affects it. There we go. That's looking all right. I like that. And just to complete it, even though nobody's going to see this when it's on that screen, but I know it's there, I'm going to add a little bit of film damage. I'm going to turn all of these things down, turn these off, because really all I want is just the dirt. So no vignetting and no scratches, but just the dirt. And really all that does is just add a little bit of dirt in there every now and then. It just makes the whole thing feel that little bit more organic somehow. And that's all to taste, obviously. And then add some 35mm film grain as well. Again, I doubt this is even visible. Yeah, you can barely see it change, but the reason I'm doing this is I want all of them to be consistent because I have other stuff as well. For example, these ones. So on here, you've got the grain and the glow as well. So this is a completely different project. This was actually done in Blender, not in Houdini. So I'm still switching between the two, depending on where I'm most comfortable with. Yeah, for what I'm doing. So I still, yeah, Blender's cloth thing still is, I know a lot about it. Let me put it that way. I'm very comfortable with the cloth tool in Blender. Maybe just up the contrast a little bit so you get a little bit more pop. The stars make it kind of wild, yeah. Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that they're a nice touch. The yellow's still a little bit overpowering, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. It's fine. Again, I have to make a lot of these. I can always tweak stuff later. There we go. Looks pretty good. Let's see. So there's the other stuff. Like one of the places where you'll see the these ones, they should all be in aces. Where you see that film grain and all that kind of stuff is on stuff like this. I have a few of these. So you can see I'm preparing for a show and we need sort of abstract stuff. This is all Blender as well. This is just displacement and shading on a plane, but you can get some wild results. Let's see. I'm just trying to go for a couple of different styles. These are fun. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So this is the reality of a lot of this stuff when you're making it. This is similar to what I posted on social media recently. If you want to know how these are made, let me know. I'm not going to do it now because I'm getting kind of tired, but I'm happy to do another stream soonish on how to set this up. This is a very simple setup in Blender, a very simple effect to do and very easy to loop. So you can see these interesting waves. Here's the denoisings flickering a little bit, so I have to re-render this one at some point, but it's a very fun effect. It's got a lot of depth to it and super easy to set up, so it's cool. So let me know if you'd like to see that. But again, yeah, a lot of stuff in here. Just playing with the cloth simulator in Blender. And I know I'm getting totally off topic, but I don't know, it's fun to show some of this stuff. So this one, this two, yeah, that ends up being this kind of stuff. Again, cloth simulation with displacement on it, that kind of thing. This one's kind of fun, but I don't think this one loops yet. I think it's not completely rendered. Just trying to get interesting perspective on things. Oh, it looks like I forgot to set this one to aces, did I? Oh no. And again, you have to imagine this being on a huge, huge wall. So if we look at this and we look at our end result, you can see it definitely pops a little bit more. Yeah, let's see if we can, where are we on this? Getting close. So, yeah, if you guys want, we can stick around till this is done, and then I can answer a couple more questions while this is doing stuff, or I can already start rendering a frame. Yeah, honestly, it's up to you guys. If you're like, no, it's all good, then we can end it here. And if you've got more questions, just let me know. There was a bit of a delay on the stream, so I'll give you a minute or two to catch up. See how this is looking in the meantime. It's going to be pretty busy still. I think that last layer of movement might be a little bit over the top, but for the most part, it'll work just fine. Should I add the stars in Houdini? No, I'm just going to get an image and throw it behind them. It's going to be easier. All right, so it looks like there's no more questions coming in. That's either a really good or really bad thing. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna end it here. I don't know if there's anything else to add. No, should be fine. So again, for the people that were able to join, thanks for joining. I didn't really announce anything. I just kind of started streaming. I thought it'd be fun. So yeah, all right. I guess that's it for me. So if you're still with me, wow, my camera's super orange at this point. All the daylight disappeared. Okay, so if you're still with me, have a lovely day, evening, whatever it is where you are, and I guess I'll see you next time. Bye bye.